All right, we are ready to go. All right, thank you so much for joining our, let's see, this is our 7th, is that right, Elizabeth? Our 7th Habitat Connectivity Spotlight series that we're doing. And tonight, we are going to be talking about Wolf Creek Pass, which is a really important wildlife corridor. But before we get into that, I want to give everyone a quick welcome and explain why we're here tonight and why this is an important topic, and do a little bit of housekeeping. So again, my name's Haley Hawkins. I'm the Southern Rockies Field Representative for the Endangered Species Coalition. I'm based in Boulder, Colorado. And the Endangered Species Coalition, our mission is to stop the human-caused extinction of our nation's most at-risk species. And we do that in a variety of ways. We do that through education and events. We do a little bit of lobbying, as well as grassroots engagement and community organizing. And habitat connectivity is greatly important to us because habitat loss and fragmentation are the greatest causes of species extinction worldwide. And we know protecting and connecting habitat not only protects wildlife, but people too. And in this time of global pandemics, promoting a healthy ecosystem that mitigates disease has never been more important. We also recognize that low-income communities and people of color are bearing the brunt of COVID-19, of climate change, and of the biodiversity crisis, and these folks are disproportionately affected. We also recognize that the North American conservation movement was built on a foundation of racism and exclusion, which continues to this day. And in Colorado, we live on lands that were stolen from the Ute, Arapaho, and Cheyenne nations. These systems that drive exploitation and conquest emerge from the same seed, whether they relate to people, land, water, or wildlife. And just as we fight each day for the protection of wilderness, wild lands, and a livable climate, we must also fight against racial injustice and against a society that perpetuates ongoing daily inequalities in healthcare, education, wages, voting access, which is especially important right now, and safe outdoor spaces, and so much more. Our work to protect natural areas must ensure healthy communities and climate resilience for all people and all species. We must work to transform ourselves and the attitudes that still pervade the conservation movement. We can't have justice for all without a healthy environment, and we can't have a healthy environment without justice for all. And with that being said, I also want to take a moment to acknowledge that today, Breonna Taylor, who was murdered because of police violence in Louisville, Kentucky, she was deprived of justice today. So we have her family in our hearts, as well as the people that are taking to the street right now in Louisville. And if anybody has any maybe confusion about how, you know, the topic of environmental justice and racial justice relates to what we're talking about today, I would be happy to go into further detail with you on that, like one-on-one. But we see these things as intricately connected. So again, welcome to our 7th Habitat Connectivity Spotlight. And I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth, who is a volunteer of the Endangered Species Coalition and the Western Slope Connectivity Project. She has been planning all of these spotlights, finding the speakers, writing up the intros, helping to plan the emails that we're sending, and she's just been a huge champion for us. And I also want to give a quick shout out to Sarah, who's another volunteer, and she's going to be manning our chat. And so if you have any questions, she'll be on the lookout for you. But with that being said, thank you all so much for being here again. And Elizabeth, I would like to hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Haley. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight and spending your time with us. Wolf Creek Pass is one of the most important wildlife corridors in the United States, and is certainly one of the crown jewels of the Rockies. We're really, really excited and so grateful to have with us tonight Matt Sandler of Rocky Mountain Wild and Mark Pearson of the San Juan Citizens Alliance. Matt Sandler is a staff attorney at Rocky Mountain Wild, which is a conservation organization, I'm reading this, that works to protect wildlands for wildlife throughout the Southern Rockies ecoregion too. He has been with Rocky Mountain Wild for the past 10 years, and for much of this time has been fighting against the construction of the 8,000 to 10,000 person village at Wolf Creek. He is one of the attorneys representing the coalition of organizations, Friends of Wolf Creek, during the past successful challenge to the 2015 final record of decision set aside by federal district court Judge Match in 2017, and the current challenge to the 2019 record of decision. He is working tirelessly on behalf of this situation. Mark Pearson is Executive Director of the San Juan Citizens Alliance, which is a Durango-based citizens conservation group of more than 1,000 Southwest Colorado residents. He is a very long-time advocate for Colorado's wilderness, wildlife, and public lands. And he has served as the San Juan Citizens Alliance's Executive Director for 12 years. He has been engaged with public lands and wildlife management topics in Southwest Colorado for more than 30 years. He previously spent 4 years advocating for wildlife conservation in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem as Conservation Director at Greater Yellowstone Coalition in Bozeman, Montana. Mark holds an MS from Colorado State University in Natural Resource Management and is a former Vice President of the Wilderness Land Trust. He is also the author of several guidebooks to existing and proposed Colorado wilderness areas and is a regular columnist with the Durango Herald newspaper. Welcome tonight, and take it away, Mark.
What are you doing? Oh.
Someone is, and please do mute your screens, everyone who is attending, since we are getting some background noise from someone's mic. Thank you. Over to you, Mark and Matt.
All right, I think Mark is starting. Are you with us, Mark?
Have we lost Mark? Oh, we might have lost Mark. No, I think he's coming back.
There he is.
There he is. Okay. Okay, so Mark, I think you're muted.
Mark, can you hear us?
Hey, Mark, we can't hear you.
Let's see. Oh, there we go. Mark, are you still connected with your phone? Because we can't hear you. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Just a moment. Let's see. Matt, any chance you have Mark's number? I want to say it might be this 2008 number, but maybe we can.
I'll try to give him a call.
How can we, oh dear.
There's always some kind of technical difficulty. Thanks, everybody. 1 second. I know I really want to hear everything he's saying, so we're gonna.
Definitely.
It looks like he's muted on the screen of participants.
Yep, he called in to make his audio a little bit better, and so I think maybe that's where the. And it's funny, I asked him to mute earlier, and so I feel like I might have started this.
So Haley, can you intercept his screen at all or no?
Oh, here, I think Matt got a hold of him.
Okay.
Yeah, I just talked to him. He's going to try again.
Okay.
We got this.
how's that in terms of sound? Hear me now?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Yay. All right.
Can you guys hear me on this? Can you hear me?
It's a little spotty, a
No.
tiny bit spotty.
We've gotten the visual preview.
Hear me, Haley, right now?
Yes, we can hear you. It's a tad bit
Nope.
spotty, but we
I'm
can
gonna try
hear
calling
you.
in again then on the phone and see what happens, right? Sorry for this. That's kind of why.
Right. Mark, would it help your bandwidth if you have your presentation view on your slides, but not on your person? Does that help save video somehow? And just use audio?
Can you guys hear me now? Over the...
Yes, try again.
Okay, I'll just try
Talking
talking on the phone like this then.
That
Right,
sounds great.
Okay, well, hopefully this will work. Let me know. Does that sound like it works okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
Yes?
sounds wonderful. Thanks.
Okay, great, yeah. So here's the 4 groups that are part of the Friends of Wolf Creek, San Juan Citizens Alliance and Rocky Mountain Wild. You've already been introduced to the San Luis Valley Ecosystem Council in the San Luis Valley. Chris Canale, I think, is on the call tonight. And then Wilderness Workshop in Carbondale is the 4th group. And tonight we're going to talk about, we'll do an overview about the significance of the Wolf Creek Pass corridor and this development that's been proposed and the issues around that, and then kind of where we are with the legal status. And I'll cover the first sort of intro parts of it, and then Matt can follow up with what's going on currently with the legal status. So for 3 decades, we've been fighting the village of Wolf Creek. We call it the Pillage. It's 8,000 to 10,000 people on top of Wolf Creek Pass to be the highest elevation city in North America. And it's located, you can see right smack dab here in Southwest Colorado on the Highway 160 corridor on top of Wolf Creek Pass. The white line there is the highway corridor. And to zoom in a little bit more, this is, you can see the significance of this corridor because it's the, Highway 160 over Wolf Creek Pass is the only paved highway across the Continental Divide for a span of 200 miles from the New Mexico border all the way up to near Lake City. So it's a crucial connection between the largest wilderness area in Colorado, which is the Weminuche, and the South San Juan Wilderness, which is has harbored some of the most wildlife-dependent species or wilderness-dependent species in our state, and was the location of the last known grizzly bear in Colorado in the late 1970s, and also one of the harbors of lynx recovery. And you can see the bullseye there is the proposed development on Wolf Creek Pass, and you can see how destructive that would be to maintain the connectivity of the corridor. And the key species we're going to be talking about is lynx. Lynx were returned to Colorado in 1999, and the Colorado, well, I think we maybe have lost the video connection here. But if we can reshare the screen here again, hopefully that'll work. Okay. You guys should let me know if you're not seeing it again. But the lynx were returned in 1999. I was fortunate enough in 2002 got to go see some of the releases at the Rio Grande Reservoir site near Creed, and they have since recolonized the San Juans, I think, fairly effectively, And the Wolf Creek Pass corridor is considered to be the most important linkage in the entire Southern Rockies and in the San Juan Mountains. So maintaining the integrity of that connection is really crucial to the long-time survival and thriving of lynx, and particularly with climate change, as you can imagine, as perhaps lynx are pushed farther and farther up in elevation. Wolf Creek Pass being one of the snowiest, coldest places in the state, or in the San Juan, or in the Southern Rockies, it will continue to be a very important location. All right. So this is a more zoomed in version of the map of the Wolf Creek Pass corridor. Again, Highway 160 is the black line. The green dashed line is the Continental Divide. And you can see the wilderness areas to the north and south, and then the other shade of green is roadless areas that are fill in most of the gap between the two wilderness areas. And then the Wolf Creek Pass landscape linkage area, which we've sort of defined, is the area largely on the east side of Wolf Creek Pass, which is where the terrain's a little less steep and rugged, and there's kind of more drainages crossing the highway, and that's the more favored location for lynx moving back and forth between the Weminuche Wilderness and the South San Juan Wilderness. And then if we zoom in a little bit more, you can see this white rectangular chunk of land in the center is the private land that is the proposed Village at Wolf Creek development, which is right next to the highway and right next to the ski area. The ski area is in fact on the on National Forest lands and is permitted by the Forest Service. And back in the 70s and 80s, the Forest Service generally had a had an intention to allow or encourage real estate development at the base of the ski areas to sort of facilitate winter recreation around ski resorts. And in 1986, the Forest Service executed a land exchange to create this piece of private land nearby the ski area, but it was not associated with the ski area operators exactly. So it's kind of a separate standalone piece of real estate that's now proposed for in various iterations for big real estate development. And you can see this little blue lake there is called Alberta Lake, and you'll keep that in mind as we look at some other pictures. But you can imagine if you stick a city of 8,000 or 10,000 people on top of a 10,500 foot pass in the middle of a critical lynx connectivity corridor, that it's going to cause some pretty enormous problems and potentially significantly sever the usefulness of that corridor in the future. So this is from the top of the ski area looking east. And that private land we talked about is sort of generally the flatter forested piece right in the middle of the photograph, and you can kind of just barely see the lake, which was on the previous map. The pass is certainly not pristine by any means. I mean, there's a highway corridor through it. There's a ski area. There's a big parking lot for the ski area. There's the base lodge, the day lodge for the ski area. There's been clear cuts. So it's not, entirely a pristine location, but it's unused by humans for at least, half of the 24 hours of each day. If you think about going over the highway pass, by 6 or 7 p.m. in the evening in the winter, there's nobody on the highway anymore. So there's a good 12 plus hours a day where there's really, little or no human activity occurring on the pass, and that's what the village of Wolf Creek would destroy. The other big interesting element around the ecology of this parcel is the fen wetlands that are located in Alberta Park, and those would be significantly altered or diminished with a big real estate development, as you can imagine. So the village of Wolf Creek, it's mountain solitude reimagined. It would be, over 2,000 housing units. Those would be trophy homes to condominiums to hotel rooms. Over 200,000 square feet of commercial space. For comparison, a Walmart is typically about 180,000 to 200,000 square feet. So think about a Walmart on top of Wolf Creek Pass there, plus a couple thousand housing units, a dozen restaurants, hotels, thousands of parking spaces. It would be an enormous change, and it'd be 24/7 activity that would significantly degrade the value of that corridor. So this is what the property looks like right now. It's looks like a regular piece of national forest land, and this is the developer's schematic of what they envision it will look like once it's been built out. So pretty dramatic change from what we have today to what it could look like in the future if it's permitted and developed. So one of the key problems for the developers and what has slowed them down is that their property does not actually abut the highway here. There's a strip of national forest land between the highway and their property. So they need to get approval from the Forest Service to access the property and to build enough of a highway connection for access for thousands and thousands of people to get in and out of the development in a safe fashion. Currently, there's maybe 3,000 vehicles a day that go to Wolf Creek Pass. If this is built out, that would almost triple to over 8,000 cars per day. So it'd be an enormous traffic change, and we know that traffic on highways is a significant cause of fragmentation and severs the connectivity of our landscapes. So that's one of the most direct impacts from the proposed development. So the guy behind it is a Texas billionaire by the name of Red McCombs. He's been pursuing this for 30 years. He's was a used car dealer who was very successful at doing that, and then he became the owner of Clear Channel Communications, a big radio station chain. At one time, he owned the Denver Nuggets and the Minnesota Vikings sports teams. And for Colorado purposes, he might be best known as having failed spectacularly at trying to build another big ski resort development at Cuchara back in the early 1980s outside of La Veta, where he tried to build a ski area in the snow shadow of the Sangre de Cristos, and it ended up being a miserable failure. So I think because his previous Colorado ski area development dream was a miserable failure, he's decided to kind of try to replicate that on top of Wolf Creek Pass with another attempt. And he's well into his 90s now, and he is not able to ever travel to Colorado again, given altitude and his health circumstances. So it's not something that he'll ever see on his own. And so, that's kind of I think a quick summary of what the issues are, but, we think it's a crucial wildlife corridor, and particularly for lynx, and, building a city on top of that pass would dramatically change the wild circumstances of the San Juans, and, irreparably sever the connection between the South San Juans and the Weminuche Wilderness. And for that reason, we've been doggedly challenging every effort over the last 20 years that that the developers have pursued to get approval from the Forest Service in many variations in order to to be able to get to the point where they can actually try to start constructing. And so far they've been stymied at every turn. And I guess with that, maybe I'll turn it over to Matt and let Matt talk more about where we are with the status of the project now. And if I can keep running the PowerPoint here, Matt, if you want to just give me the thumbs up when you want me to advance.
Yeah, it'd be great. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for bringing us up to that point. And oh boy, I could talk all night about Wolf Creek. I've been involved in this case now for almost 10 years, from writing comments to the past 2015 record decision, to litigating that case, to Judge Mach ruling in our favor and setting aside that past decision, and then the real frustration since then, where the Forest Service turned around and just made a new decision, choosing an access easement instead of the land exchange, and basing that on the same analysis that Judge Mach found was unlawful. So it's a very clear violation of the National Environmental Policy Act to be using analysis that did not consider all the different aspects and issues involved. And really the federal authority and control to really protect our national forests and protect Wolf Creek Pass that the Forest Service just continues to want to give up to this developer. And there's no end to the frustration at really trying to fight this thing and continue to highlight the failures of the agency to really do the right thing here. And to take this back to the beginning, so this parcel was acquired, as Mark said, back in the 80s. And originally, when it was Red McCombs and Charles Level wanted this parcel, the Forest Service said no, said it was not in the public interest. And back then, they were proposing to the Forest Service development of a 208 unit development with a couple of base lodges and a couple of restaurants. So that was it, 208 units. About 2 weeks after the Forest Service said, no, it's not in the public interest, they did an about face and decided, yeah, they would transfer this parcel to Red McCombs and Charles Level to develop this 208 unit lodge or something similar. And that past analysis said, that 208 units was a worst case scenario for what this development would look like. And back then, the ski area was actually a partner in this development. Through the years, Red McCombs and the ski area ended up disagreeing. I have a hunch that it's because it went from 208 units, which is maybe more reasonable for Wolf Creek Pass, to more like 2,000 units, which I think even the ski area saw as just totally changing the character of this area that I believe is special to this family, the Pitchers who own Wolf Creek ski area. So after they ended up disagreeing about how things would unfold, they ended up in court and resulted in a confidential settlement where the ski area just kind of stepped out of it, and the developer was left without the access that was originally contemplated, that was going to go through the Wolf Creek ski area parking lot and on a Forest Service road into the parcel that after the settlement, the ski area uses as a ski run, and the developer was left without the access they need to build this massive development. It's arguable whether they have access to build a 208 unit development, whether they have access to build development that can be accessed over snow, similar to other resort developments throughout the West. And these are all things that we've continued to argue the Forest Service needs to analyze throughout their National Environmental Policy Act process. So I'll be referring to that as NEPA. We use lots of acronyms in the world of environmental law. So NEPA requires federal agencies, when they're taking actions that will significantly impact the environment, to go through a process of analysis where they need to analyze the direct, the indirect impacts, cumulative impacts, and alternative actions so that they can do a comparison and make sure that the agency makes the best decision. NEPA doesn't say they have to make the best decision, but the idea behind NEPA is that if they look at all the factors and consider alternatives and look at all the impacts, that will result in the decision maker making a better decision. So unfortunately, in this case, the decision maker, who's Dan Dallas, has continued to make decisions that we think and courts have agreed with have been unlawful. Let's see, if you want to go to the next slide there, Mark. So I've talked a little bit about how the Forest Service is doing their job. They're essentially, our big complaints in this case are that they're using a statute called ANOCA, so the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act. So a statute that was supposed to focus just on issues in Alaska, but which has one provision that deals with access to inholdings that has been expanded down to the lower 48. And what it says is that the Forest Service needs to grant adequate access for reasonable uses of an inholding. Now, what the Forest Service has done is essentially said that if they find that a development is reasonable, a development of any size, then they need to grant that access. And then what the developer does after they grant that access is up to Mineral County to decide. So they've really pawned off their authority to protect the national forests onto the county, which again, Judge Mage found in our last round of litigation to be unlawful. Judge Mage said the Forest Service is responsible for protecting our national forests. That's not the job of Mineral County, and expecting that they're going to do the right thing for our national forests was arbitrary and capricious. So that's some of the language that we have to show in order to get agency actions overturned. So again, the Forest Service is really doing the same thing, saying, well, we think some sort of development's appropriate, and that's going to require paved access. So we're going to allow that, and whatever happens after that is on private land, and we don't have any authority over that. Well, even that is true. When they transferred this parcel originally back in the 80s, they put a scenic easement on it. So the Forest Service retained control over what development would look like, and put restrictions on certain things that could not happen up there on the pass. So, they do have that authority, and they just are failing to act pursuant to it. They also have authority through ANOCA to put terms and conditions on the access to protect the national forest lands. And again, they're refusing to do any of that. And one of the reasons this is so important to Rocky Mountain Wild, and I think to a lot of people here, is that Wolf Creek Pass is such an important wildlife corridor for the Canada lynx. And the Canada lynx is protected through the Endangered Species Act, and also the protections put in place in the Rio Grande Forest Plan through the Southern Rockies Lynx Amendment. So pursuant to the Endangered Species Act, the Forest Service had to go through the consultation process with the Fish and Wildlife Service. That's another aspect of this decision that we're currently challenging in court, because the biological opinion that Fish and Wildlife Service has drafted only considers harm to lynx caused by vehicle lynx collisions. Now, clearly, as Mark touched upon, and I can talk more about, there's so many other ways that this development is going to harm lynx. Just the traffic and the avoidance of this road corridor is going to harm lynx. They're not going to be able to travel north and south. They're not going to be able to maintain genetic diversity within that Southern Rockies population, a population that's so important to the future of the lynx because it is isolated from the populations up in northern Wyoming and the populations up in Canada, that if we cut off the South San Juans and the Weminuche from migrating north and south, we're really losing a big chunk of lynx habitat. And one of the scary things that the Fish and Wildlife Service is doing is setting a trigger for reinitiation that is only based on traffic levels. That when traffic levels, if they increase more than the maximum traffic anticipated by the full bill out of the village, then they'll look back into lynx issues. Well, by that point, the whole population down there could be impacted and possibly, severely diminished based on just this drastic increase in traffic. And that's not even mentioning what the development up there would do, having 8,000 to 10,000 people up on the pass throughout the whole year. If you think about activity on the pass now, it's skiing in the winter, during the day, night times, nothing. Summers, you have tourists going back and forth and hiking, but it's relatively unpopulated for much of the year. Now, this development is going to add a huge population base up there with people dispersing into the wilderness areas, light pollution, sound pollution, pets. All of that is also going to harm lynx. And pursuant to the Endangered Species Act, take is also defined as harm, things that interfere with breeding, feeding, movement. So clearly, the village is going to harm lynx in ways much different than just vehicle lynx collisions, although that is a danger to the lynx. If you want to go to the next slide. So I think I touched on most of this. I guess I'll just also highlight the impacts to the lynx from beetle kill up over Wolf Creek Pass. This has been a big issue. And also some timber harvests up there as well. All result in cumulative impacts to the lynx. So if people have other questions about lynx or lynx impacts, happy to touch upon those after the presentation. All right, Mark, if you want to go to the next slide. All right, so one of the ways they're touting this village is for the town, really. They call it a village, but I refuse to latch on to that language. I mean, this is a town. When you have 8 to 10,000 people someplace, that's bigger than a village. So one of the ways that they're touting the benefits of this town up on Wolf Creek Pass is that it's going to be a great economic boon to the area. Well, that's maybe the case. There may be new jobs, but as of now, anyone who skis Wolf Creek is staying down in one of the towns on either side of the pass, in Pagosa or Del Norte. And those businesses are going to be severely impacted when all of a sudden people are staying up on the pass and eating up on the pass and renting skis up on the pass and not supporting those local businesses, but funneling all the money into this new development and into the pockets of this Texas billionaire. All right, we can go to the next slide. And also water. Water is a big issue up there. This is the headwaters of the Rio Grande, and for using groundwater to be running this massive village, even though they do have water rights claiming to augment water depletion, if we're in a drought year, they're just not going to have enough water to put back in these rivers and streams for downhill users, and that's another big issue. Putting this massive population center in this high elevation environment. So other issues, very far from nearest towns, from hospitals. Anyone who's spent time above 10,000 feet knows it's hard on the body. That this, people are going to be coming up from sea level, low elevation, and thinking that this is going to be a spot they're going to want to spend significant time. They may be in for a rude awakening. Huge snowfall up there as well. Not necessarily a place where it's easy to construct such a huge development. And as Mark touched upon, that Kuchar development failed. So what happens when they start this and realize that, yeah, this isn't economically feasible, and they just have gone and destroyed what really is a mostly pristine area. There is a road, there is a ski area, but aside from that, it's a pretty special place that's fairly undeveloped, and that's unique in Colorado. Many of our big ski mountains have these big resorts, and Wolf Creek does not need that. If you want to go on to the next slide. Is that it? I think that's the last slide. So just, a little bit of more. So we are currently aiming to file, well, we're currently on deadline to file our opening brief next week, challenging this new decision. A couple months later, that briefing will end, and the judge will make a decision on this. Depending on, I think, either way the decision goes, it'll most likely end up in the Court of Appeals. And the aim of the developer is to start construction up there next summer. Our goal is to continue to stop development, to keep Wolf Creek Pass wild, to keep the pillage off the pass, and we're going to fight as much as we can to make that continue to be the place that it is and keep this development off the pass. I guess anyone listening, there's not currently any public participation processes, but there have been a number of comment periods throughout the life of this development and this agency action, and there may be others in the future. So, get on our mailing lists, get on Friends of Wolf Creek mailing list, and we certainly will keep everyone posted if there are opportunities for folks to participate or write comments or express opinions about building this type of town up on Wolf Creek Pass. Okay, so I'm just looking, there's a couple questions. What are downstream water rights? So folks, farmers in the San Luis Valley rely on water from up in Wolf Creek Pass. Other folks surrounding this area also depend on water that comes down from the pass. So they have a right to a certain amount of water. And there has been some analysis of water, but not adequate analysis to ensure that they're not going to interfere with the water rights of folks below them, and that they're going to have enough water to sustain a village of this size. Let's see. Trying to keep up with these questions. Let's see. Would the county be liable if they damage downstream water rights? Now, full disclosure, I'm not a water attorney. I know what needs to be analyzed in a NEPA document, and our position is that this hasn't adequately been analyzed. But there are processes. If downstream water users feel like their rights are being impacted, they have rights in water court to go and challenge upstream users. Let's see.
Matt, to kind of save you from reading the chat and answering questions, I might hand it over to Elizabeth and Sarah to give you some support there.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So let's see. We have some questions about the towns and the surrounding it. But Tracy Coppola, let's start with hers. Who is in your Army? Local, state, federal stakeholders, and are there any leaders in Colorado that are involved?
Oh, well,
Yeah,
I wish we had an
Mark.
army, but it's.
You wish what?
Okay. Go on, Mark.
Yeah, I
We're
can
more
weigh
of
in
a
a little bit,
scrappy
and
militia.
and maybe Chris can chime in a bit too. But over the years, Pagosa Springs and Archuleta County have been pretty critical of it because it's interesting. The development is entirely in Mineral County, so all of the tax benefits go to Mineral County, but all of the impacts will go to either Rio Grande County or Archuleta County in terms of the population of workers, schools, emergency services, ambulances, sheriff and police departments and all that kind of stuff will land on South Fork and on Pagosa Springs, and they won't get any of the actual tax revenues from the development, which is in Mineral County between the other two counties. So on the west side, Pagosa and Archuleta Springs have been pretty critical. On the valley side, I think South Fork and Rio Grande County have been pretty in favor of it politically, and Mineral County has generally been supportive of it, but it's a long ways from Creed, where everybody in Mineral County actually lives, all 600 of them. So it's had, I think, pretty uniform opposition from the local public, and the people who ski at Wolf Creek are very much opposed to it. The owners of the ski area have been kind of muzzled by a legal settlement that they were forced into by the developers about 10 years ago or so, and Matt might have a little bit more detail about that. Our federal elected officials and the governor we haven't really had a reason to be asking for their assistance recently, but I think that's something that we would want to pursue in the future, is to particularly work with Governor Polis's office and the state agencies that are under him if it gets to that point. We're certainly tracking, like, the Colorado Department of Transportation. They're not big fans of having a gigantic intersection impacting their highway on top of one of the snowiest locations in the state. And so they are actually potentially kind of an ally in this, which might be somewhat surprising. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a lay of the land.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to turn over the questions, picking to Sarah Nielsen, who is in Grand Junction. And Sarah, why don't you help steer us through the questions?
Okay, so a few people have been asking about, have the healthcare people been vocal about this new village?
Have the who people? I didn't quite catch that.
Oh, the people who work in healthcare.
Physicians and hospitals. So I have not heard any vocal opposition. But certainly the issue has been raised that healthcare facilities are a distance away from this, and there could be issues in transporting people, especially in winter storms and times like that. So I think there should be concerns, but I think more of the concerns is getting people there, and maybe less from the hospital workers.
Okay. Next question is, are there any wildlife underpasses or overpasses?
Yeah, so that's been a big issue. Is the developer has set up a fund to put money in based on how many units are actually developed that would go toward lynx conservation efforts. It's unclear what those efforts would be. They're going to put a panel together in the future to come up with recommendations for what those funds should go toward. But I will say it's not enough money to construct an overpass. And there are underpass structures on Wolf Creek, but in the winter they get covered in snow and they're not effective. So as far as crossing structures or mitigation measures, there's really not a lot that can be done up there. I think an overpass could be effective, but again, there's just not the funding to construct that type of structure.
Okay, how did the development begin as a 208 unit, go to a 10,000 unit? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, so it's frustrating. And I don't have a good answer. I would say maybe greed, that all of a sudden this developer got this parcel and they just thought bigger. They thought, well, let's, shoot for the stars now. Why stop at 208 units when we can build something bigger? And Judge Mage did pay attention to that. He wrote in his order kind of that history that in some ways this was a bait and switch, that they promised, they committed to one thing, they got the parcel and then turned around and really, now we're trying to do something that's really unreasonable for this area. So we're hoping that Judge Arguello also agrees that that's just not right.
Okay, that was my question out here, Elizabeth's, and the bait and switch seems to me to be a key factor in this entire case. So I don't understand how it is that it's just that hasn't been addressed, all along. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Sarah.
Okay. With climate change affecting snowfall, many ski areas are having to make snow to stay open. But that'll be a ton of water too. Has this been considered?
Well, this is Mark. Since Wolf Creek gets the most snow in Colorado of any ski area, they don't have any snowmaking capacity there, and I don't think they've felt the need to. So they might likely be the very last ski area in the state that's really very affected by climate change from that perspective. So, but if they ever did need to, it is right at the very top of the watershed. Unlike many of the other ski areas in Colorado that are lower elevation and can tap larger streams for their snowmaking water supply. But I don't. So far, I think it's more. More of a issue of the water supply for the development. In terms of the impact to the ski area, if they actually got 8,000 more people at the village of Wolf Creek who all wanted to go ski each day, that would more than swamp the ski area. Now the ski area's sort of maximum capacity is about 6,000 people at one time during the day. So if there was some big increased capacity of, a bunch more skiers trying to ski there because they're staying at all these lodging facilities up there, that would overwhelm the ski area, and it would drastically change the character of skiing there, which is one of the reasons why so many local skiers are so adamantly opposed to the development from occurring, just because of the dramatic change it would make to the ski area experience.
Yeah, what I would add to that, Mark, when they're trying to fill hotel rooms and condos, they may start trying to make snow early. Add some snowmaking to get some of those easier runs open early to get people out skiing and out using the mountain. I would also add there's a master development plan for Wolf Creek ski area, which expands the mountain and puts in more beginner terrain. And that's something that the Forest Service has continued to fail to analyze along with the village proposal to see what the impacts are truly going to be of this huge population center up there and expanding the ski area to match this increased demand.
This is Chris from the Ecosystem Council, and I just wanted to address the water supply issues very quickly because they're so complicated, and really for them to do what they want to do, they're going to have to build enormous water tanks up there. And I mean tanks, like huge, 30 by, 30-foot tanks, strapped together, 6, 8 tanks. And we're talking year-round folks. I mean, it's not just going to be in the wintertime, it's going to be all year round. So all of a sudden the water supply issue changes for the watershed. And so here you have farmers and ranchers, and especially farmers that need that water supply in August, right, for late season flow in the river, Plus, the Rio Grande has compact obligations to New Mexico, Texas, and the state and the country of Mexico. So it's complicated. And so how are the timing and delivery of these water obligations going to change? Because now we have a massive structure up there that has to be supplied.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And Chris has done a lot of great work looking into the water impacts and water usage and issues that would stem from this development. So thanks, Chris.
Zyla Pearson asked, could you touch on all the regional, not just local impacts that are interrupting this corridor? How might other counties throughout be affected in southern Colorado?
Well, that's a large question. Who would like to take that first?
Yeah, thoughts on that, Mark?
Yeah, I'm not sure how other counties would necessarily, or their communities sort of would be as affected. I think it's, you know, I think it would overwhelm Pagosa and South Fork. I think, as Matt mentioned, it would put some of the local businesses out of business because they wouldn't be able to compete with some of the, you know, on-mountain convenience that might occur. You know, I think it's really more the concern of folks who value Wolf Creek, and maybe they come from Durango or Santa Fe or further afield, and just the enormous change in the character of Wolf Creek. And the owners of Wolf Creek, I mean, they really embrace their brand of being kind of like how skiing used to be in Colorado, and it's all about the skiing, and it's not about all the, you know, amenities at the base area. So I think, you know, that's probably the further afield impact that concern a lot of people.
Mark and Matt, can I jump in and say, and speaking of, you know, regional impacts, you know, from a wildlife perspective, if lynx can't move, you know, that might impact, not only would that impact the lynx, but also, you know, wildlife watching gives more economic benefit to communities than hunting and angling combined, according to like a 2017 Colorado Parks and Wildlife report. And so if our lynx, you know, can't move, and maybe we have wildlife watchers, I don't know, maybe that's kind of in there, woven in there somewhere.
Yeah, and actually another maybe more, you know, more significant impact to some of the local economies might be if this really significant lynx connection is severed and destroyed, and it, you know, diminishes the ability of lynx to thrive and survive in the state, and it elevates the likelihood they become, you know, listed as endangered under the Endangered Species Act, and there's more habitat development limitations put on logging and all sorts of other activities across the San Juans as a result of, you know, lynx being in decline. I mean, there's a whole cascade of effects that could affect the economic activities of other people farther afield elsewhere on the Rio Grande National Forest and the San Juan National Forest, just because this one development is so destructive and has such a negative impact on the ability of lynx to thrive over the long term.
Yeah, I would also add that although, you know, we're focusing a lot on lynx, this is also a really important wildlife corridor for many species: deer, elk, you know, really anything migrating between these wilderness areas. It's going up over Wolf Creek Pass.
Yes. Okay, I think, did Jean Reitz asks, how does the developer propose to address the on-site wetlands?
Well, they're gonna, you know, build bridges over them and try to avoid, well, they, you know, based on Clean Water Act requirements, they'll have to engage the Army Corps of Engineers to determine how wetlands can be managed and try to reduce impacts up there. But inevitably, when you're dealing with this type of development and groundwater depletion, those fen wetlands, which are such unique areas, are going to get destroyed. I can't see any way that you put this type of development up there with salting the roads and all the other just impacts of construction and high elevation use. I mean, there's such sensitive wetlands that I fear we're going to lose.
Right. I don't know.
And the developers realize it's a big problem for them too, and that's why they tried to trade the wetlands back to the Forest Service so they could get more dry ground to build more, more housing units on. And that was one of the things that was actually defeated most recently by us. But it's kind of funny, the Forest Service created this issue. They gave the wetlands to the developer to begin with in 1986, and now the Forest Service has been saying, well, you should give them back to us because you might destroy them otherwise. So it is just kind of a total cluster that was sort of the Forest Service's own creation 30 some years ago.
Oh, okay. Well, this is the ongoing saga, and people are dropping all sorts of comments in the chat room. Clearly, this is very important to everyone here tonight. And what I think a lot of people are still wondering is, what can we, before we wrap up, what do you think, Matt and Mark, what can we do as concerned citizens at this point? Anything we can add or put our bodies across the road?
Yeah, that's a good question, because we've been trying to think about good ways to engage people while the issue is being thrashed out in court at the time, for the time being. And if there are people who live in the nearby counties, in Archuleta County or Rio Grande County, for example, or Mineral County, it'd be really beneficial to get a hold of you guys, and it would be useful for us to be elevating this with county commissioners sort of ahead of time before there's a new development pitch that's made by the developers to the local planning departments. And then we also need to be working, as I mentioned, about trying to educate Governor Polis's administration to kind of get it on their radar screen, probably at a higher level of visibility, because they haven't had any reason to have to weigh in on it. But I think they could be allies, and we probably need to do a better job here as the advocates in terms of creating some opportunities for people to engage and to express their opinions to decision makers who may not need to make a decision right away, but sometime in the future we'll be probably faced with making some decisions. So it'd be good to have that pump primed.
Okay, so it sounds like we could start on that as soon as possible, trying to figure out how to reach or raise awareness in Governor Polis's office. Is that right?
Yeah, just to make sure, and we have good allies at the Department of Natural Resources. So, they're always sort of overwhelmed with the crises of the minute. So, figuring out what is the thing that we need to do. And ultimately our goal is to, frustrate the developers so much so that they will decide there's a better way to spend their time and effort, and that if they really want to make a financial return promptly, they should go invest their money in some other kind of development project that'll pay off a lot more quickly than this one apparently will. And and the idea eventually would be to either find some entity that would help return that land back to public ownership, like a trust for public land or a nature conservancy or a conservation fund, who could orchestrate some kind of deal to get it back, or get some sort of a conservation designation put on it voluntarily by owners who might finally come around and realize what they're proposing really isn't in the best interests of the public.
Okay.
Yeah,
Matt, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I think that's totally right. I think we engage with our organizations, support our organizations, so we can continue to fight against this. And we certainly will let everyone know when there's opportunities to engage if it ever gets to Mineral County to make zoning decisions and approve development plans. That might be an opportunity. So yeah, just stay connected and stay informed.
Okay.
Y'all, I'm sorry. Can I throw my weight around and ask one more question? I'm really suddenly really curious if I know that this is in southern Colorado. I'm not actually sure how close it is to the border of the Southern Ute Reservation, but is there like nope, Elizabeth is shaking her head. I guess I'm wondering if there's any reason to have tribal consultation or involve their nation.
Yeah, it is a Southern Ute and Mountain Ute traditional territory, and also the Navajo and Apache and Pueblos, and so I think the Forest Service makes some kind of attempt at consultation. It may not be as robust as we think it should be. The Southern Utes have not particularly been that helpful on other kinds of development projects. They are the largest natural gas producer in Southwest Colorado, so they have they also have some of the most important wildlife corridors, and they've done tremendous amount of research on the big game wildlife corridor. So they kind of have a dual approach, I guess you might say, to both developing but also advocating for some protection for their resources. But they have not weighed in on Wolf Creek at all to date. Yeah, but there might be some other tribal interests that might have actually a more significant desire to participate.
I'm remembering that the lack of tribal consultation is one of the things that helped to postpone, delay, or the drilling around the Sand Dunes National Park. And so, I don't know, just a thought. Sorry to interject.
Yep, right. No, a good point. And the Navajo were very involved with the Rio Grande Forest Plan in terms of promoting an appropriate protective designation for Blanca Peak, which is one of their sacred peaks. So there has been some reasonable amount of outreach done by the Rio Grande National Forest in the past.
Yeah, great. Okay. And certainly probably people up here in Denver would be happy to go march around in front of Governor Polis's window or something like that. I don't know. Truly. So one last question, and I know we're a little over time. Thank you for bearing with us. Judith Lopez writes, who would be responsible for providing education for children in families that moved to this pillage? Are they for this development?
Well, good question. And sort of presumably there would not be any employees that would probably live at the pillage, I would guess. I would think they want to reserve sort of all the available headspace up there for paying customers. So presumably workers would commute from, Pagosa Springs or South Fork or Del Norte. So that is one of the associated community impacts where, if there is increased population, increased families, more kids in schools, those communities will not see any increased revenues, property tax revenues from the development because it'll be in a different county from them. So that's been one of the issues that local governments, in particular Pagosa Springs and Archuleta County, have raised in terms of their concerns about the development, that's the kind of impact that will land on them, that they won't get any financial compensation to handle.
Right. Okay. Well, everyone who's on this webinar, we really appreciate your spending your evening listening and talking with our speakers and other participants. And I want to encourage Matt Sandler and Mark Pearson to provide any sorts of links or other information that we can forward on with the recordings from tonight that we're going to send to all registrants. We have about 100, more than 100 Haley people who registered. So certainly we'll go beyond our gathering tonight. It is a saga of amazing proportions and probably one of the most important stories in the United States at this point in so many ways. And the lynx is at the center of it, as we know. Thank you all for your comments in the chat. And thank you all for continuing to help fight for this ridiculous, absurd, never should have happened development. Matt and Mark, do you want to say anything in closing?
Just thanks everyone for tuning in. It's an important issue, and hopefully we'll continue to keep the pillage off Wolf Creek.
That's right. Thank you again.
Okay, well, thank you both. Thanks San Juan Citizens Alliance and Rocky Mountain Wild, both for all the incredible work that they've been doing, and the San Luis Valley Ecosystem Council as well, and the other members of the Friends of Wolf Creek. You're doing this on behalf of all of us, so we thank you. Everyone, the link to this will go out tomorrow, and I think we'll even try to save the chat and pull some things from it for everyone who's participating tonight. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Good night all.